In 1770, a small wooden ship became the first vessel in history to map the east coast of Australia. It changed the world. The crew of 94 men spent 3 years at sea. They mapped coastlines nobody in Europe had ever seen. They made contact with civilizations nobody knew existed. They collected over 30,000 plant specimens, 1,400 of which were completely new to science. The ship's name was HMS Endeavour, and then it disappeared. For 250 years, nobody knew where it went. The most famous exploration ship in history. Just gone. Last week, archaeologists confirmed they found it, and it wasn't at the bottom of the Pacific. It wasn't lost at sea somewhere between continents. It was sitting in a harbor in Rhode Island, in America, the whole time. This is the story of the greatest ship in the age of exploration. What it did, what happened to it, and how it ended up forgotten at the bottom of an American harbor for 2.5 centuries. Stay with me, because this story has a twist nobody saw coming. To understand why finding this ship matters so much, you need to understand what it was. And here's the thing, HMS Endeavour was not supposed to be a famous ship. It was built in 1764 in the town of Whitby on the northeast coast of England. And it wasn't built as a warship. It wasn't built for exploration. It wasn't built for glory. It was built to carry coal. Its original name was the Earl of Pembroke. It was a collier, a working ship. Flat bottom, strong hull, built for stability rather than speed. The kind of ship nobody wrote poems about. In 1768, the Royal Navy bought it for £2,800, roughly equivalent to about $400,000 today. They renamed it HMS Endeavour, and they gave it a mission. Officially, the mission was scientific. There was going to be a rare astronomical event, the planet Venus passing across the face of the sun. Astronomers needed to observe it from the South Pacific to calculate the distance from the Earth to the sun. The Navy needed a ship to get them there. That was the public story. The private instructions, sealed and given only to the captain, contained something else entirely. After observing Venus, search for the great southern continent. Rumors had circulated for centuries that there was an enormous undiscovered landmass somewhere in the South Pacific. Find it. Claim it for Britain. The man they chose to command this mission was 39 years old. His name was James Cook. Cook was not from a wealthy family. He was not from the nobility. He was the son of a Scottish farmhand who had taught himself mathematics, navigation, and cartography from scratch. The Royal Navy had noticed his exceptional talent for surveying and mapping, and they gave him a chance. It would turn out to be the best decision they ever made. The Endeavour left Plymouth Harbour on the 26th of August, 1768. 94 men aboard. They sailed south, rounded Cape Horn at the tip of South America, one of the most dangerous passages in the world, and continued into the Pacific. They reached Tahiti in April, 1769. They set up their telescope. They observed Venus crossing the sun. Mission 1, complete. Then Cook opened his sealed orders and turned the ship south. In October 1769, HMS Endeavour became the first European ship to reach New Zealand since a Dutch explorer had briefly sighted it a century earlier and never returned. Cook spent 6 months charting the entire coastline, both islands, producing maps so accurate that they were still being used by navigators 200 years later. And then, in April 1770, came the moment that would define the ship's legacy forever. At dawn on the 19th of April, 1770, a lookout on HMS Endeavour spotted land to the west. Land that no European had ever mapped. Land that no European had ever charted. The east coast of Australia. Cook brought the ship carefully south along the coast, searching for a safe anchorage. On the 29th of April, they landed at a bay that Cook would name Botany Bay, because the botanist Joseph Banks was overwhelmed by the number of plant species he found there. For the first time in recorded history, European boots touched the east coast of Australia. And in the trees, watching quietly, people who had lived on this continent for 60,000 years. I want to pause here for a moment, because this moment is complicated. For British history, this landing is triumphant. For Aboriginal Australians, what followed was catastrophic. Colonization, displacement, disease, the destruction of ancient cultures and communities. Both of these things are true simultaneously. And this ship, this ordinary coal ship from Whitby, is the symbol of both. Cook continued up the coast, mapping, recording, nearly dying when the Endeavour struck the Great Barrier Reef and almost sank, limping to shore for repairs, pressing on. By the time the Endeavour returned to England in July 1771, it had been at sea for nearly 3 years. It had mapped New Zealand. It had mapped Eastern Australia. It had collected specimens that revolutionized botany. It had changed what Europeans knew about the world. James Cook became a national hero. HMS Endeavour became the most famous ship in Britain. And then, everything went wrong. When the Endeavour returned to England, the celebrations were enormous. Cook was received by King George III. Joseph Banks became famous across Europe. The scientific findings filled entire volumes. But the ship itself, the Navy had no more use for it. The Endeavour was a coal ship. It had done its job. It was slow. It wasn't elegant. And Britain had dozens of warships that were more useful for what the Navy needed. In 1775, just 4 years after its triumphant return, HMS Endeavour was sold. It was sold to a private shipping company. Renamed, the most famous ship in exploration history, became just another transport vessel, hauling cargo across the Atlantic. Its new name was the Lord Sandwich, and then history intervened in the worst possible way. In 1776, the American colonies declared independence from Britain. War began. The British needed every ship they could find. Military vessels, transport ships, anything that could carry soldiers and supplies across the Atlantic. The Lord Sandwich, the former Endeavour, was hired by the British government. It carried Hessian mercenary soldiers to New York. For a brief period, it was used as a prison ship in New York Harbor, holding American prisoners of war. In 1778, the war reached a crisis point for British forces in Newport, Rhode Island. A French fleet was approaching to support the American rebels. The British commanders faced a choice: fight the French in open water or block them from entering the harbor. They chose to block the harbor. On the 5th of August, 1778, the British deliberately scuttled 13 ships in Newport Harbor, sank them on purpose, created an underwater barrier to keep the French fleet out. The Lord Sandwich, the Earl of Pembroke, HMS Endeavour, was among them. The ship that had discovered Eastern Australia, the ship that had charted New Zealand, the ship that James Cook had trusted with his life for 3 years across the Pacific. Deliberately sunk in Newport Harbor by the same country that had built it, and then forgotten. The French fleet never actually entered the harbor. The British eventually abandoned Newport anyway. The ships at the bottom of the harbor were simply left there as the war moved on. And when the war ended, and the years passed, and the decades turned into centuries, nobody remembered which ship was which. The ship that had discovered Eastern Australia, the ship that had charted New Zealand, the ship that James Cook had trusted with his life for 3 years across the Pacific, deliberately sunk in Newport Harbor by the same country that had built it, and then forgotten. The French fleet never actually entered the harbor. The British eventually abandoned Newport anyway. The ships at the bottom of the harbor were simply left there as the war moved on. And when the war ended and the years passed and the decades turned into centuries, nobody remembered which ship was which. Newport, Rhode Island today is a wealthy, picturesque harbor town. Sailing races, mansions, tourism. Every summer, thousands of boats move through those waters. Directly underneath them, 13 wrecks from 1778. The problem was, nobody kept precise records of exactly where each ship was sunk. And over 250 years, the wrecks had become buried under layers of harbor sediment, disturbed by anchors, by dredging, by the constant movement of boats overhead. Multiple wrecks, unclear historical records, 2.5 centuries of decay. Which one was Endeavour? Researchers had been trying to answer that question since the 1990s. The historical records were frustratingly incomplete. The ship had been renamed twice, Earl of Pembroke, then HMS Endeavour, then Lord Sandwich, which made tracking it through documents confusing. And there was another complication. Australia cared deeply about finding this ship. For Australians, HMS Endeavour isn't just a historical curiosity. It's the ship that brought the first Europeans to their coastline. It's bound up in their national identity, in the complicated story of colonization, in questions about history and heritage. The Australian National Maritime Museum became involved in the search. International funding came together, and the effort to find Endeavour became one of the longest, most painstaking underwater archaeology investigations ever attempted. The person who led that search for most of its history was a marine archaeologist named Dr. Kathy Abbas. She founded the Rhode Island Marine Archaeology Project, RIMAP, and began systematic surveys of Newport Harbor in the early 1990s. And she kept going for 25 years. Let me give you a sense of what that work actually looked like. Newport Harbor is not a clear tropical lagoon. Visibility underwater is sometimes less than a meter. The sediment is thick. The water is cold. The wrecks are buried, not sitting neatly on the harbor floor, but under layers of silt that have to be carefully excavated without disturbing the fragile wood beneath. And there are 13 wrecks down there. Each one has to be investigated individually. Each one has to be measured, sampled, documented, and then compared against historical records to rule it in or out. The team used side-scan sonar to map the harbor floor, sound waves that bounce off objects in the sediment and create images of what's buried below. They identified multiple anomalies, multiple possible sites. Then the diving began. Each candidate site required careful excavation. Remove the sediment layer by layer. Expose the remaining timbers, measure every dimension, record everything, then compare against the one document that could tell them whether they had the right ship, the original 1768 ship plans for HMS Endeavour, held in the archives of the UK National Maritime Museum in London. Plans drawn by hand over 250 years ago, showing the exact dimensions of every timber in the ship. The Endeavour had specific characteristics. A flat bottom, unusual for the period. A particular internal structure. Timber sourced from Whitby in northern England. Iron fastenings in a specific pattern. If the wreck matched, it was Endeavour. If it didn't, move on. Try the next one. Year after year, wrecks were investigated and eliminated. The dimensions were wrong. The timber species didn't match. The construction method was different. And then, one site kept coming back. The dimensions were right. The flat bottom matched. The timber species, English oak, was consistent with 1760s British shipbuilding. The iron fastenings were in the correct pattern for the period. Wood samples were sent to laboratories for dendrochronology, the science of dating wood by its tree rings. The results came back consistent with timber felled in the 1760s in northern England. The location of the wreck matched the historical descriptions of where the British scuttling took place in August 1778. And, critically, traces of copper sheathing were found on the hull. In 1768, before Endeavour departed on Cook's voyage, the Royal Navy sheathed the hull in copper, an expensive anti-fouling technique used to protect the wood from marine organisms during long ocean voyages. It It was one of the first ships in the Navy to receive this treatment. The wreck had it. Piece by piece, the evidence accumulated. No single item was conclusive on its own. But together, dimensions, timber species, tree ring dates, construction method, copper sheathing, location, historical records. Everything pointed to the same ship. In 2022, the Australian National Maritime Museum announced their conclusion. They believed they had found HMS Endeavour. Some archaeologists wanted more evidence. The debate continued. Last week, the confirmation became definitive. After 25 years, hundreds of dives, thousands of measurements, samples sent to laboratories across 3 countries. Dr. Kathy Abbas and her team had found it. HMS Endeavour, Earl of Pembroke, Lord Sandwich, sitting in Newport Harbour, exactly where the British had left it. In 1778, when the confirmation was announced, the reaction in Australia was extraordinary. Because for Australians, this isn't just a ship, it's a symbol. A complicated, contested, historically loaded symbol, but a symbol. This is the vessel that brought the first Europeans to their shores. Everything that followed, settlement, colonization, 2 centuries of history, traces back to the moment Cook brought this ship into Botany Bay in April 1770. And for Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the reaction is more complicated still. Because what followed that landing was not a glorious story. It was one of the most devastating experiences in human history. The destruction of communities that had lived on that continent for 60,000 years. The ship is a symbol of that too. For Maori, people in New Zealand, the same complexity. Cook's charts were followed by settlers. The story of what happened next is still being negotiated legally and culturally today. A ship can mean very different things to different people, and this one carries more weight than almost any other object in the Southern Hemisphere. So what happens now? That question is genuinely unresolved. The wreck is physically in Rhode Island. American maritime law gives the US certain rights over wrecks in American waters, but the Australian government has a strong claim to the cultural and historical significance of the ship. Options being discussed include raising parts of the wreck for museum display, creating an underwater heritage site where divers can visit, leaving it entirely undisturbed. There is no easy answer, and the conversation between American, Australian, and British institutions is just beginning. What we do have, right now, are the artifacts already recovered during the investigation. Copper sheathing, iron fastenings, timber samples, small objects that survived 2.5 centuries underwater, physical pieces of the ship that James Cook sailed to the other side of the world. Objects you can stand in front of and think, this was there, in Tahiti, on the Great Barrier Reef, at Botany Bay, and underneath all of it, underneath the tourist boats and the sailing races and the summer visitors who have no idea. The rest of the ship, still there, in the mud, waiting. In 1764, a shipyard in Whitby built an unglamorous coal ship. Nobody gave it a second thought. In 1768, the Royal Navy bought it and sent it to the other side of the world. In 1770, it changed the map of the world forever. In 1778, it was sunk and forgotten. In 2026, after 25 years of searching, it was found. The same ship, 250 years apart. History has a habit of hiding in plain sight. The most significant objects, the most important moments, the most consequential voyages. They don't always end in museums or monuments. Sometimes they end in a harbor, covered in silt under tourist boats, waiting for someone who refuses to give up. Dr. Kathy Abbas spent 25 years diving the same harbor. Most people would have stopped after 5. She didn't. Because of that, history got its ship back. If this video made you see history differently, subscribe. Every week on this channel we go looking for the stories that got buried, sometimes literally. And if you want to follow the HMS Endeavour excavation yourself, the Rhode Island Marine Archaeology Project publishes updates on their website. Link in the description. Next week, we're going somewhere even older, a discovery that rewrites what we thought we knew about the very first humans. I'll see you then.